welcome once again to our annual discussion on all things automotive with a particular focus on Aston Martin. Today we're going to be talking about Aston Martins, and we're once again at Nicholas Mee Company, and we've got two Nick and Neal we have every year, and we're very fortunate having two guests with us as well. So, Nick, a few words on you, please. You're Managing Director of the company.
Yep, and I've been going a long time. I don't know what I can say, Steve. I think anyone that's seen the videos before will know what my role here. I'm the name above the door, and we've a few years ago moved up here. Got 22 odd people on board now, quite an active business. And yeah, we're doing this because we enjoy sharing our knowledge and having a chit chat and insight with clients and enthusiasts who may want to watch this video once a year. It's like almost like a podcast, but it's on video. And so yeah, you don't need to know much about me. Thank you very much though, Steve, for agreeing to do it again this year.
Well, that's
very kind of you. And yeah, our two guests who I'm sure you're going to introduce in a second.
Okay, Neil.
I'm still serving my apprenticeship, 17 years with the business, and prior to that time with Aston Martin Racing with their GT1 program, and prior to that some Formula One experience.
Great, and we've got Alex Goy, who is a YouTuber and a journalist of note, and there's also own an Aston, which is great.
Yeah, well, I'd say recovering YouTuber at this point. So
okay.
I used to host a channel called Carfection, where we used to go out and tell nice stories and play in amazing things. And I always used to enjoy anything with some Aston wings on it. So much so, I bought one, and I love it.
You can't beat that. And James Elliott, who I've known for a long time, that's got a couple of interesting classics, and editor-in-chief of Octane at the moment, aren't you, James?
That's right.
And has been for how many years?
Since 2017 I joined Octane, and it's great, long may it last.
Jolly good. Well, I'm Steve Wakefield, and it's my fortunate job to have been doing this the last few years, and I come from a bit of an Aston Martin background, having raced them and been involved with the Aston Martin Heritage Trust. So, kicking off with this year, looking back on what's happened in the last 12 months, I'll ask you, James, what's the atmosphere in the classic car world? Are we still buzzing?
I am, because I'm buzzing whichever way it is. When the market is absolutely flying, I see a lot of good in that. You get new people coming in, you get a lot of interest. New events as well. People forget how much events spin off the state of the market and the optimism within the market, and that's great. If the market's a little bit more docile, and I think everyone will agree it has been for the last year, it's been sort of plateauing or even falling back a bit to sort of pre-Brexit levels, then I still see that as a great thing, because that means a load more cars that I couldn't previously afford are now sliding into my price bracket, and that's the same for everyone else. It's, go out there and buy.
Okay. And how about you, Alex? What have you been up to this year? How's it at the cutting edge of new cars and opinion on the car world?
From an Aston Martin point of view, it's been a fantastic year, obviously, because Vanquish has just come out. We've had I had a quick squirt in a Valor. The new Vantage has appeared, and they, quite I wouldn't say different products, but definitely staking ground for Aston. But otherwise, the scene in general, lots of people are launching lots of cars, some exciting and V80 and V12e, some a little bit less and a little bit electric-y, with varying degrees of success. But in some ways, the industry, its hand is being forced a little bit. In other ways, people are finding neat ways to get around it. So we can still have lots and lots of fun.
Well, that's what we want to. We'll be looking at that a bit later on. But I mean, going back to sort of business here, we're surrounded by some fantastic cars once again. What's business been like? I mean, we want to get to this time, we want to have a look at some of the business angles, prices, and get to the nitty gritty of it all.
Yeah, sure. A month to go, of course, but so far exceeded expectations, actually. We didn't have particularly high hopes for 2024 because we knew that there was going to be a lot of political uncertainty, and that has affected us and consumer sentiment in the past. We knew that there was going to be the UK general election, and we also knew that there was going to be a US election. So we're pleasantly surprised. Volume-wise, car sales, we're about where we wanted to be, and we've had some great stock again this year. And yeah, we're pleased. Workshop has been incredibly busy, which is always a good barometer for us. People are still enjoying their cars. They are willing to invest in them. They're asking for trim refurbishment, paintwork, upgrades. That's always reassuring. And third part of the business is our parts division. That has been incredibly busy. And one interesting thing to observe there, our online store sells parts to people all over the world. And seeing some of the countries that now have Aston Martins is really interesting. Who knew that there was a DB7 Vantage in the Cook Islands? Not us, until we sold some service items, and the gentleman's really pleasant, and he seems to be ordering.
I think you've got to
bits
go
and
over there
pieces.
and do a feature on it, haven't you?
I think it needs to be test driven on site in the Cook
And
Islands.
see if you can max it over there.
How long are the Cook Islands?
How big are they? Yes.
I don't know. And how about you, Nick? I mean,
Yeah.
you've I hesitate to say been around and seen quite a lot of it, but another year goes past.
Not the Cook Islands, I have to say. I was actually being asked this question earlier on today, and going back to Neil's point, if you asked me at the beginning of the year how I thought this year was going to pan out versus how it actually has panned out, I've been pleasantly surprised. There's been a lot of challenges over the last recent years in the economy and you know, the whole scene with Ukraine and so on and so forth. And so we didn't expect a great deal out of this year, but it's been better than we thought, which is encouraging. And yes, as Neil said, service parts is good news too. It's a very unpredictable business in the sales side, which is what we're talking about now. And I think probably the most difficult thing out of this year has been to detect trends, because we do have quite a varied stock of cars from DB4s, 5.6s, right through to some of the more modern stuff. And trying to detect what's hot and what's not, being difficult. You know, that has an effect on what we try and go out and stock up with. But yeah, it's been a better year than it could have been.
But it hasn't followed its typical seasonality for us. If you remember, normally we don't expect too much out of the first quarter, but around Easter is when things really start to come to life, and we're then generally busy. April, May and June historically are our three busiest months of the year. This year it didn't happen because we didn't have much of a spring. It was raining and freezing cold. And then going into June, the general election had been announced, and that caused a distraction. So it didn't really start for us until the end of June, but July and August, which is when we try to go away on our holidays and have a bit of a break, were much busier than usual.
Yeah.
Everything's
Yeah.
been pushed back a little bit.
Yeah. No, it does feel a bit sort of, the calendar's all gone a bit skew-whiffy this year. But, you know, we just have to deal with it.
Of course, one of the most obvious and easily something you can dive into at any time of the day is what's happening in the auction market, and we always include a sort of a bit of a talk about that, don't we? And I know that you two have got quite strong feelings on that. The auctions in the UK haven't been quite as good as the ones abroad, and perhaps it's a sign that either the business is slightly different over here, the business model is different over here, or people want a different experience buying
I think
cars.
we've had a different set of circumstances here. We've come out of Brexit, and there are all the ramifications of tariffs between different countries, UK and other countries. We've had all of the upheaval with the trustonomics and the high interest rates, etc. And it's been different from other countries, I think, is what I'd like to say. We've had our own issues here, you know, interest rates going up, etc. But it does feel now, after election, after a budget, which probably hasn't helped us as a business, paying employees national insurance, and after a presidential election, it's difficult to see now anything other than a slightly calmer period, which would be good for people's confidence. After all, confidence is a very important part of why you go and spend a lot of money on a motor car. We know there's enthusiasm, we know people get pleasure out of it, but they are by definition large amounts of money, and of course people just want to feel as if it's all safe, and you know they're not being silly with their money, which we understand. And so yeah, without these events coming now out of the way, a little bit of stability, I think we're going to be good for the future. But we've had those things, and that's been different. Going back to your point about auctions, though, I think our overriding view is there's just too many of them. And of course, you've had, you know, in the last couple of years, the rollout of online auctions as well. And the unfortunate thing is that those figures that come out of auction, sale prices, are published, and they're very easily accessible and available on the internet. And they don't really reflect, we don't think, the true value of cars that we're selling, because after all, you're buying at auction. That's it. There's no comeback, there's no preparation, there's no, what are you getting? If it's wrong, you can't send it back. It's a different thing. And we like to think that the people that are buying cars from us want the reassurance of something that's being fully prepared, and if they've got a problem, someone who's going to help them out and look after it and so on. These things come at a cost that's not reflected in auction, published auction prices. But it's just what it is.
Okay, Neil, would you say that for someone who is relatively new to the classic car world, that it would be easier for them to talk to a retail, in a retail environment, rather than just sticking their paw up and buying something?
Yeah, absolutely. At their leisure, if they wanted to come and view a car 3 or 4 times before making a decision, that's no problem with us. We'll find time in our diary. But I think we are now selling cars to a different generation of buyers, and our observation is that they're not necessarily as mechanically minded as previous generations were. I was born in 1977. My first car was a 1983 Mini, and before I got out on the open road, I pulled that car to bits and put it back together. So I had half an idea how a car worked, what a spark plug was, but now people have grown up with electronic cars rather than analog cars. When it comes to buying something 60 years old, they aren't necessarily as confident, as comfortable of opening the bonnet and fettling and fiddling as previous generations were. They want us to do that for them. They want to come here, the car be absolutely on the button, the history file be perfect, and then just be able to enjoy their car. Whereas when I started doing this 17, 18 years ago, people were more than happy to roll their sleeves up, more so than they are today. And auctions don't necessarily provide that. So that is a factor. I think there's less people looking at auction catalogues for that dream DB5 that they've promised themselves than there were 15, 20 years ago.
And also, I was speaking from a personal basis, covering auctions quite a lot. I think the big flood of the cheap cars from the Middle East is sort of petering out now, and the prices have stabilised on those. We don't see so many at auction. Everybody knows how much they cost to restore them. There's no paperwork, all that sort of thing. I think we are quite possibly getting towards the end of that.
I think so, and a lot of some of the people that have bought those have been very aware of what they're buying and costed that in, and other people have not been very aware of what they're buying, and there's been some tears around the place from people who have bought what they thought was a cheap car that turns out to be rather an expensive exercise, because they've needed, complete rebuilds. I mean, it's not a funny matter when particularly with DBs, you factor in the cost of a proper restoration, which wherever you go is going to be north of £200,000, and if you go to the factory or Aston Martin Works, it's going to cost £450,000. So there's been lots of tears going on there. But yeah, those cars I think have come to an end. you know, that's just a specific really in the DBs more than anything else, few V8s. And I don't think you can compare what we sell with those cars in any way at all.
And what about online auctions? They were sort of proliferating, weren't they, after lockdown? There was a new one popping up every 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was the success of the bring a trailer model in the US that probably kick-started things here. I think people have tried it on occasion, maybe not had the result that they were after, realised that it's not quite as easy as it may appear. There's logistics involved. Say you're bidding one evening and you're successful on getting a car and it's up in Manchester, then what? Oh right, you've got to go up there. It's not quite as easy as going to the dealer around the corner and buying one. I don't know, what do you think to the online auction scene?
There are lots of them, and it's always very tempting of a Friday night with a glass of something and going, I really want an RS4, or there's an RS2, that, because there's always that it's tempting you with, I could get this for a lot less than I know it's actually worth. And you can stare at these things and go, I could get away with that. You do the maths in your head and you figure out that yes, I could have this or I could have that. But then conversely, I know people who run their cars through some of these. And there's sort of the very well known ones and sort of the more startup-y ones. And they've had sort of blazing rows with their mates who said, oh, you've got to do this, yeah, it'd be great, run it through that. And they've got less than half of what they expected and been very, very, very unhappy. So you end up with a lot of people who'd be very keen to buy a car, go, well, they've put all this work into the listing and it's great, and they get their dream motor. But then on the other end, you get someone who's really cross because they feel like they've been done over. And there are you know, week on week, well, maybe less now, but it felt like there was a new one popping up, each with a slightly different angle or lick of paint. This one specialises in brand X, this one brand Y, this one represents this sector, this one represents that sector. And there are only so many cars in the world, right? You can't. There can't be an auction platform for every single one.
I think it's. I don't know what you think, James. I think it suits a particular age of car, doesn't it? Type of car, sort of Porsches and newish Ferraris and perhaps Mercedes SLs or Golf GTIs or something. You're not going to sell a Delaunay Belleville on an online auction, are you?
Well, I think Brightwell's might.
Bring a really big trailer for that one.
Exactly. Very good.
Necessity being the mother of invention, I have to admire how the auction houses in COVID turned their skill set into the online auctions and managed to make trade where there was no trade to be done. You know, they had a global situation which was making them doing what they do pretty much impossible, and they found a way around it. But then all things that boom online, whether it's eBay or anything else, you know, it used to be in print. There always used to be the one where people were selling things where they didn't know what they were worth. And I think the last print thing was loot, which was fantastic for people not knowing what they had, and you could get a bargain. And that started, you know, I remember when eBay started and we were all over eBay because there was so much stuff being bought very, very cheaply. But that's not there anymore. You go to eBay now and it's quite often more expensive than going and getting it from a more reputable source. And inevitably, the same happens with auctions. To begin with, when less people know about them, there are bargains to be had. Now, it's more of a seller's market, I think. There are some big prices to be had, but an awful lot of, so many cars are going through. I don't think that it stands apart, either as a buyer or a seller now, as something completely individual where you could either get a bargain or an enormous amount of money for your car. I think it's much more competing on a level playing field with all the other methods of selling a classic car.
And the other thing, I think the other point worth mentioning is that when you go to a live auction, a lot of the bids come through the internet, don't they?
Yeah.
And this, you know, you go to one of the ones in America, it's millions. It could be a $7 or $8 million Ferrari or something, and someone will put a bid on it online.
We'll never know the statistic, but it would be interesting to know the percentage of people that bid online that actually have been and seen the car first. Because, you know, I don't know, it fills me with fear to think you're going to spend a lot of money on something you've never actually clapped your hands on or eyes on and looked at and smelt. And, you know, how do you know what you're buying?
They'd be advised to, wouldn't they?
Yeah, you know, my recommendation to anyone, you know, thinking of buying a car is at auction is basically, unless you know the car, don't.
And also, if it's something new, like a new hybrid supercar or something, well, it's only done 200 miles. What's going to go wrong with it?
Quite a lot,
Used
actually.
3 years. Hell of a lot, like £100,000 battery pack or something.
I mean, on James's point earlier, was saying that cars either don't go for us or go for what you think they're worth. Do you think that's because of the kind of democratization of knowledge that the internet gives?
Yes,
Say
it's
you are.
terrible.
It's awful, isn't it?
I used to much prefer being able to go out and buy things from people who didn't know what they're worth. I'm not into ripping people off, but I do, whether you like watches or cars or anything else, any idea of getting a bargain nowadays or getting something a bit special has gone, Yeah. And I do think that takes a bit of the romance out of everything. But it's not just because I'm hungry to try and rip somebody off, but everyone knowing the value of everything. Surely that's something George Bernard Shaw had something to say about.
Well, we use an expression from time to time with people here about them knowing the price of everything and the value of nothing.
To your point though, James, we're sometimes asked, where do you find all these amazing cars in your showroom? Do you go to auctions to buy them? But we don't, because we're competing against retail customers. There's one aspect to it. But secondly, because everyone would know what you've paid for the car, and not everybody would be comfortable with you making a profit.
The trade isn't in general. The trade's not buying cars at auction. I don't think very much at the moment.
Well, there's
Partly
one of the
because
reasons
that.
why.
And they've got the stock anyway.
I mean,
That's one of the main reasons.
but things change, and but it's never that comfortable when there's. If you go back 15 years, auction results were just auction results. You actually had to search for them, not on the internet, but try and, you saw that car, say, how much did it sell for? Do you know, or does anyone know what that car sold for? Now it's all easily available.
Apps, hammer price.
Yeah.
And it's not always really representative of the value of everything, is perhaps going back to Neil's point originally. But yeah, given the internet, the world's an expert. Maybe.
And of course, they also have.
There's a lot of them about, Alex.
Yeah, a lot of people. Was it the more you know, the less you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I think
Sometimes.
also, you talk about people taking a punt on expensive cars at auction. I think that's changed dramatically in the last generation. 25 years ago, you consciously were suspicious of any car put through auction as to why are they putting it through auction where people can't test drive it.
Because they can't sell it elsewhere.
Now, as Nick and I were actually discussing, because of the way that the classic car market has gone up, there are more good cars than there have ever been previously. So when I got into this game 25 odd years ago, an awful lot of cars weren't very good and weren't restored, and a lot of them were sort of at the end of their first life. Now, if you just look around in this showroom, you've got a couple of quite modern cars, but we've got a couple of older cars, which are also like new. And I think that the quantity of really, really good cars has changed people's psychology when it comes to bidding at an auction or something, in that they're prepared to take the risk, because you can read in a catalogue it's been restored by the right people, or it's been here, or it's been there, and that gives you the faith to take the punt. But there are elements of auctions which you will never sort of be able to test drive it and delve its history in the same way as you can if you go to a dealership and spend some serious time there. That's just a fact of how the two systems operate.
We're often saying it's not actually in the description, James, it's what's not in the description that counts.
Yeah. So, right, putting you two on the spot, beginning of the year, getting towards the end of the year, what have prices been doing? Are they stable, or what do you reckon? Come on.
So prices, again, I go back to this thing about having a varied a stock of different models. It's always difficult to measure prices, and of course most of the cars that we have, we're very fortunate, and it comes because we've been doing this for a very long time, are in one way or another special. So, if you look around at some of the new era cars, they're, I don't know, carbon editions or ultimates, or not just the ordinary version. So that actually sets it apart. And with the older cars, they tend to be to a way above average condition. So, you know, yeah, the prices that we adopt are prices that we feel able to justify when it comes to selling a motor car. Where they're going, whether this crystal ball stuff, we have had a period of time, and to me it feels since 17 or post-referendum, when values have plateaued other than a little bit of a blimp during the time of COVID and lockdown and people being at home with nothing to do other than search and buy cars. It just feels to me that after a few years of decline, flattening and to some level decline, let's be frank about it, and we are talking, say, 7 years, it feels to me like we must be near the bottom of that curve. If not the bottom, I don't think there's far to go. And I think actually the future is going to be bright, particularly when one looks at the landscape with new cars and new car offerings, which to a great many people are not really terribly interesting. You know, old cars are a finite resource. As people become older, they generally become wealthier and have more time on their hands. And there are more events going on, you know, every year. There seems to be new events that people want to go to, which is great. And so given a combination of finite resource, more people getting a little older and becoming wealthier and having time on their hands, some of those are going to want old cars, for sure.
That's been the case for a while, so it hasn't changed basically.
No, it hasn't changed. No,
pretty stable.
Yeah. All that's changed over the last few years is the confidence level. In my view,
we've had a lot on, haven't we?
Yeah, we've had a lot going on, and I think given a level playing field in you know, political arena and in the economy, is going to be really good news moving forward for the classic car and new era. I mean, we say classic cars, we're into collector car, classic car, historic car, we're into lots of different areas these days. But it strikes me that actually the level of enthusiasm, the following for old cars generally, everything old, whether it's tractors or lorries or whatever, has never been greater. Events are greater, and you pitch that against new cars, slightly boring, and the price of new cars. Very interesting. New cars have become ridiculously expensive.
Talking new, Neil, do you want to add
yeah,
something
I was
to
going
that?
to add. If you're putting me on the spot, I would say on an average, we're probably looking at something like 10 to 20% softening of prices.
In what period?
2016. 2016. The most resilient era of cars, the V8s, 1970s and 1980s V8s, because they are on trend. There aren't so many of them. When you look at Vantages, 300 in total, well, you compare that to the numbers of DB5s, that's a third of the number of DB5s across 18, 19 year production period. So there's not so many of them. Those are really popular and those have been resilient. Have they softened? Not really, but the market's polarizing a little bit.
Sorry,
Sure.
I'm fascinated by that. Are the buyers for the V8s a different demographic to the buyers for the DB5s?
There are some clients who have both eras of cars. They are into the mark and they like to have a modern one and have a 1980s one and have a 1960s car. But generally, no, it's a different buyer. I don't think it's a younger buyer. That's a good story, actually. We sold a 1987 V8 EFI to a chap, and he said, could I have it for next Friday? And we said, yeah, sure, we'll do our best. We'll get it through the workshop, make sure it's on the button, get its MOT. If we can make it happen, we will. And I'm pleased to say we were able to. And he came in and he said, I'm glad I was able to collect the car today. It's my 54th birthday.
Oh, that's nice.
And he said, when I was 14, 40 years ago, I had a picture of that car on my bedroom wall. And he is very typical of the buyers of those V8s. They grew up aspiring to them, they've saved hard, they've worked hard, they've had a good bonus, now they're in the market to treat themselves.
Excellent. Good. It's always reassuring to know that there's
There's a new
another
wave
wave
coming
coming.
through.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And also, without getting too technical, that the V8 as a model is a slightly easier model to handle than an older DB, isn't it? 60s six-cylinder DB.
Yeah.
They're not as expensive to restore.
No, we, because of our position in the market and the fact that we do have a showroom, we do sometimes attract people at the start of their journey on owning a classic Aston Martin. You know, they've had their big birthday or they've sold their business and they're going to treat themselves. And quite often they arrive and they're naturally drawn to the 1960s cars. And we have a good look around them and we go out for a test drive. And not all of them are comfortable when they get back from the test drive. Oh, this was not quite what I was expecting. I haven't driven a manual car for 20 years, some of them confess. What else have you got? And we'll show them the V8s, and that may end up in a road test as well. And when they come back, this is what I had in mind. It's got the feel of a classic car. It smells the leather. It's lovely. But you know, the power steering, that helps, doesn't it? And the
Air conditioning.
brakes, air conditioning. So that can happen here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've all talked about this, the demographics changing over the years, and there's more activity as a buyer group from 40, 45-year-olds to 60, 65-year-olds. There's more buying activity in that age group than there is in an older age group. And that age group of people, what are they interested in? Probably the car they looked at in the magazines or on motor show stands when they were being taken around on bonding sessions with their fathers at the NEC or Earlscourt. That's the car that's the icon car for them. And yeah, there's lots of people in that age group who are, you know, they've either sold a business or inherited some money or whatever and want to indulge their passion. That's the car for them. So it explains really why V8s have been more resilient. DBs are 4s, 5s and 6s, they're the icon cars, and as Neil said, they're the ones that people come in to look at, but then they discover it's actually not quite what they thought. So there is a...
But looking at the numbers before this session, what might be making up for if there is a slight dropping off in demand of the 1950s and 1960s cars domestically, we are selling cars more globally than ever. Typically, probably something like 1 in 5 of our sales are abroad. I think it's going to be in excess of that number this year, and to some new markets as well. When I started, yes, we would do a few deals each year with Northern Europe, a few to the States, and that was about it for export. But now we're getting inquiries from Asia, Middle East, because possibly there's more Aston Martin dealers around the globe now, a lot more than there was 20 years ago, in a lot of new territories. India's now got 3 dealerships, China's probably got half a dozen dealerships, and people are finding the mark through buying a brand new Aston Martin, falling in love with the mark, starting to buy the magazine or receive the magazines and starting to follow Aston Martin on social media, and they one day say, well, I'd really like an old one in the garage alongside the new one, and that's stimulating more global demand.
And also the cars are built here, aren't they? So it's you know, it's an advantage, isn't it, buying an Aston from a specialist in this country, I suppose.
It holds us back in some markets, actually, that there isn't more infrastructure to support the old cars.
Plus, a lot of the older cars were right-hand drive, weren't they? So you will get some markets where they really only want left-hand drive, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, you get into this thing, yeah, the majority of production on the DBs was in right-hand drive. There's a big appreciation for them in a lot of export markets, but they don't want a car that's been a right-hand drive car converted to a left-hand drive car, because then it's not original, So you get into a bit of a cycle with all of that. Yeah.
And just to close out, Steve, I did look at also which car that we offered for sale this year had the most inquiries and it was a V8 Zagato, V8 Vantage Zagato.
Oh, right.
We had a fantastic blue V8 Zagato.
Well, Alex knows that because
Yes.
we talked about
We
it.
did
at
it on the
Hampton Court,
stage,
didn't we?
at Hampton Court, and we debuted the car at the Hampton Court Concours of Elegance, and Nick was able to agree a sale there and then.
It was the level of interest was quite a surprise, actually. Because,
How many of them were made in the
they
end?
are
It
a
was
Marmite
handful,
car.
right? It was 30?
50 production cars, 2 prototypes, but it's been a Marmite car from day one. People either love or hate it. It's of a period, and personally I like them, but not everyone does. And so, yeah, it was a risk, but we took it to Hampton Court, displayed it well. People loved it. 2 people actually tapped me on the shoulder during the course of the weekend and said, "For me, car of the show," looking at the Zagato, which was quite gratifying.
Was one of them me?
No, it wasn't actually. But so, yeah, that's interesting. But it does kind of gravitate to what you're saying earlier on about the demographic. You know, that does appeal to a 50-something-year-old guy. That's the car that, was on the motor show stand, that did 180 miles an hour and did 0 to 60 in 5 seconds and all that sort of stuff. It was a contemporary to 288s and 959s. It was always compared to several magazines.
And it was
did
bought by all the
test.
big collectors, wasn't it? I mean, Rowan Atkinson had one.
Yeah.
All the
Yeah.
big guys in the Aston
Yeah.
world had one, didn't they?
Yeah. It was.
Well, you couldn't get one, could you? You had to
Yeah.
be on the list and all that sort of thing.
It was a noise in the day, but it kind of fell off a lot of people's radar, probably because there's only 50 of them. You know, how do you maintain visibility when there's 50 around the world?
Whereas now, with a limited run of 50 cars, it would be the most celebrated thing ever because there's only 50 of them, but they'd be all over Instagram. But I guess back then, Instagram was but a glint in a milkman's eye.
It wasn't even thought about.
Nope.
We're talking about the old brick telephones.
Oh,
But of course, that was obviously a very powerful, fast car at the time. With how many horsepower?
It was quoted at
475?
no, it was quoted at 430, but it was lighter than the V8. That people forget about that.
And now, I mean, talking about new cars in Aston's range, which I'm sure you've driven most of them, they are extremely powerful and extremely expensive.
yes. Both. I mean, if you look at the so the V12 behind's probably not the greatest example, but the say a regular V8 Vantage from 2005 onwards, it's 420, 430 horsepower, and they were what might have to refresh my memory. They were 70, 80 grand new.
Yeah, I think they were 80,
Then?
90. Yeah.
You know, they were a 911 competitor, but 911 at the time was 350 to 400 horsepower. Now, your cooking Vantage, your entry-level Aston Martin is 680 horsepower, something like that. Yeah. So it's more definitely 600 plus, like a ludicrous figure for the small one, and it's 120 plus, if memory serves.
You might remember the expression that, when you're talking about power, people used to say, on a good day. Well, these days, you've got the power
Every day's a good
under
day.
the right circumstances, because basically it's cutting the power all the time. If there's any damp on the road or you're going around a corner, it's all done electronically.
Yeah.
And so you're not really getting
I mean,
all the power all the
I
time.
would admit, I drove the new Vantage in perfect conditions, in partly around a circuit in Spain and partly around, the Spanish countryside, where the roads were either nail straight, all perfectly dry, or there were some lovely twisty bits, and it was. The experience is absolutely excellent. I would never class myself as a helmsman. I'm not a big skiddy person. I like, having fun, being able to communicate with a car and experience the most I can out of it without, leaving any marks on the road or on the seat. And it will let you get away with a lot of silliness, and it will let you play with it. You can really feel like you've exploited it. You think, what, these engineers had me exactly in mind when I press this button and it goes into Sport Plus mode and it makes extra noise and it does extra movement and all that, and you feel like an absolute hero. If I tried it in one of those or even that, I would be in a hedge.
Yeah,
Especially
V12
with that much
Vantages you have
power.
to respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to. There's a lot of especially now the market for new car buyers. You're saying earlier, people aren't really willing to go under the hood of their car and tinker. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm not willing, but I was never taught how to do it. So the idea of popping the hood of my new Vantage and starting to mess with stuff fills me with abject horror.
You couldn't.
But I
You
think
just couldn't do it. But
they've probably got the best range, haven't they, at the moment, than they've had since the first cars from Gaydon came out. Now, all the cars now are really, really good, albeit very expensive and very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Which plays into our hands, I think. Because if you look at Gaydon built cars, be it DB9, DBS, Vanquish, phenomenal cars, which in the market today, there's some great cars that you could buy, 12-cylinder, normally aspirated, low, all the power you're actually ever going to need and be able to handle for a third of the price of new ones. It strikes me as being...
And speaking of that sort of thing, I mean, what about residuals on these multi-100,000 cars?
Well, who knows?
Yeah, I think our challenge is to not just think of the UK market all the time. UK market is always going to find it more difficult to digest the new prices of Aston Martins. £200,000 for the Vantage, £400,000 in the case of the new Vanquish, because we've got so many preconceived ideas of the prices. We're used to your point, Vantages 15 years ago, how much they were worth then. But Stroll, when he bought the company 2020, did say where he wanted to take it, which was cranking everything up to 11. He wanted the cars to be the fastest in their sector, and fair play, he has delivered that. The new Vantage has been turned up to about 13. The new Vanquish broken the dial, really, with 834 brake horsepower. Will it be to the tastes of many of our clients? I'm not so sure. The cars might be just a bit too big physically for our roads, and a bit too expensive on day one. They might just sit on the sidelines and wait for them to get a bit cheaper. But the UK represents a much smaller percentage of Aston Martin sales now than it did 20 years ago. I think of the Vanquishes that are going to be built next year, they're on record of saying that there's going to be 1,000 of those cars. The UK's only probably going to get about 10% of those cars. Whereas when the DB9 was launched, it would have probably been something like 30% of sales.
I mean, on the sort of moving through time, price point, and how company images move. I remember when I was wee, I'd sit in the bath and flick through the back of Top Gear magazine. They used to have all the listings of how much stuff would cost. I think, oh, maybe one day I can afford one of those. I think a Ferrari 360 was 85, 90 grand. And now how much is a cooking Ferrari?
Yeah,
and that's the brand.
350, is it?
Yeah,
the equivalent.
It's silly money. Like, one, inflation's a thing. Two, the way Ferrari is now perceived. Forgive me for using the F word in hallowed halls, but the way the brand perception is, the way it handles itself, is very, very different now. And I think Aston Martin is, as you're saying, Stroll wants it to go that way, so that's the way it'll be going.
Will it work for them? Well, time will tell. But I think the reality is Aston Martin's becoming slightly less recognisable to some of our clients that have been buying these eras of cars over the years. But the new clients in the Middle East, Far East, some of these emerging markets, they're not going to be as familiar with the prices of Aston Martins over the years. They're not going to have so many preconceived ideas, and they probably haven't got a vehicle to part exchange either, which is going to be an issue, going back to your point about residual values, that it's going to be a lot to stomach if you're taking your DB11 in and wanting a DB12. That price to change figure is going to be chunky, and not everyone's going to have the appetite for that.
Definitely, it's but it is, as you said, it's less reliance on the UK. Time will tell.
Yeah,
but
I think you're absolutely right, Steve. I think the product lineup today is as strong as it's been.
And
for
they're
a
still
very long
doing
time.
limited editions like the Valor, which I think we had one here, didn't you?
We did, yeah, and it was. We've
And
actually
you've
been involved in
driven one,
two.
Alex,
Yeah.
haven't
I had a good old go in their prototype earlier in the year. Oh, it's really good. It's really, really, really good. It's every now and then, James, you could attest to this. Every now and then you get in a car, and even though you know you might not be able to push it to its very limits, you know it's a bit special. Just every inch of that thing, you see it, and it's so very different from everything. I mean, it's based on the last gen V12 Vantage, which was, or the pre-facelift V12. You know the one I'm talking about. So there's some bits on the inside where you go, oh, that infotainment, that's the old Mercedes thing, and that looks a bit weird. And then you turn it on, and it makes that glorious noise. And then there's a proper manual gearbox with a proper chunk to it, and it's a very, very, very special car. And I'm incredibly privileged to have had a few hours to play in it. And everyone who's got one of those has got something properly mega on the drive.
Yeah.
Or in the garage, or in the bunker, or wherever.
I think that's a car that's possibly won Aston some new clients, people that haven't necessarily considered an Aston in the past. The guy that's into his Ferraris or Lamborghinis, that's one that might have turned his head.
And also, it hints
Well,
it's retro styling, isn't it? So it goes back to the look, sort of the V8 Vantage.
But they've played that whole V-car thing, they've played that very well. If you look at the extent of the range in previous years, there was a big gap of the silly Halo car, which the other manufacturers that they were competing with always had. And Aston would have its special editions and lots of special editions.
Lots of special editions.
But it never quite had, what it's done with the V-cars is catapult itself onto a level of those other manufacturers that can afford to do the very low volume, very, very specialised stuff. And if that was part of Lawrence Stroll's master plan, I think they played that card brilliantly.
And there's Valiant that's about to, there's 40 of those or something?
38.
38. Fernando Alonso, he appeared at Goodwood, and we had a bit of an interview, and said, why have you done this? Well, I wanted this on my Valor, and I wanted that. And we said, well, sod it, let's build a new car instead. Let's make a different one.
So come on then, Alex, a Valor or an F80? Or I'll let you have the McLaren as well, the new McLaren hypercar.
I would have the Valor. I mean, well,
You don't have to say that.
No. I'm predisposed to liking British cars anyway. Always have, always will. The Ferrari does look very nice. The McLaren looks a bit like a spork, and now I've said it, you can't unsee it. I think there's the tech fest of the other two. They're incredible bits of engineering on paper, but when are you going to use all that? I mean, when are you going to use all of the Valor? Really, you're not. But at least you have sort of the drama. You've got the V12 noise. You've got the manual gearbox, and for a car like that, for me personally, it ticks that kind of box.
Yes. Manual box is a great statement of intent. It's something that Porsche have picked up on as well.
Yeah.
In whatever the state of the internal combustion engine and the future of it. I think the manufacturers that are recognising that there's an enthusiasm of that flame's not going out and are appealing to it and pandering to it, they're doing us all a favour. We're very grateful.
I think with Valor, the positioning of that manual gearbox is quite important, because the last gen Vantage, there was a manual one which didn't exactly fly off the shelves, if memory serves. But this one, there are only going to be a set number of cars, and you can only have it with a manual. But it's special, and it's in your colour, and it's in it's got your trim, and you're this and you're that. So the people who want that car really want that car with a manual gearbox.
Yeah, and I think they're going to be good news moving forwards as well. I'd imagine the residual values on those are going to be pretty good, because there's 110 worldwide. Not inexpensive to start with, of course, but nowhere near F80 levels, which is what, €4.5 million plus tax.
Yeah, and
they've sold all 799.
F8 is it 799 they're going to build? Or something?
I sold it.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, 799,
That's 799 people that have to have it, or they don't get offered the next one.
And of course,
But then what's the next one? So that's the bit we're all facing at the moment. Is what is the next one?
A lid on one.
You know, is it going to be more hybrid, or is it or 100% electric? And I think the whole industry is in a very strange place at the moment with this onset of electric. I think it's clouding a lot of people's judgments moving forward, and I think a lot of manufacturers are probably waiting to see if there's any changes going to take place in that legislation.
I think Aston might be playing a blinder on that, actually. Have they got the resources to get into electrification at present? That's for them to answer.
well, we've got a new CEO, Adrian Hallmark, who's
It's
only
gonna
just
be high
started,
up
but it's
on
his
his
job.
agenda.
Well, don't forget,
I
as
would
time passes, that technology becomes more and more off the shelf. So having to spend too much
they might
money.
be doing the right thing by saying, I think we're just going to watch and see what develops here. But
wish
it's
the
going to be
government-
high up on Adrian's agenda for sure.
I wish the government had had the same attitude of, I think we'll wait and see what's going to happen, rather than just plunging in with the first bit of advice they had and putting carte blanche rules out, which have caused unbelievable distress for whether it's your part of the industry, my part of the industry, or the manufacturers. It's just been a ridiculous situation that should have been avoided. All they had to do was listen.
I think they are listening now. I mean, you know, with this, through the Historic and Classic Vehicle Alliance thing, we're hearing more and more
They've made a big difference.
that they have made a difference, and they have acknowledged that their one fix to the problem, being electric, isn't actually the fix that they thought it was going to be, because it doesn't apply to ships and aircraft and heavy machinery. You know, so there's always going to be a liquid fuel with the technology we have at the moment.
One of my favourite things, of course, everything within the M25 is ULEZ, and when you drive out of town on the M4, there's a variable speed limit, and there's a little chunk that says lower to 60 miles an hour for emissions reason. It's right next to Heathrow Airport.
Yes.
It does my head in every single time.
Yeah.
Just put an honest sign up.
Yeah.
Because of all those emission regulated areas.
Yes.
No, I think the company's in a good place. I think it's an interesting time to be involved in Aston Martins, and I think it, particularly with limited editions like the Valor, I think it can reflect well on older cars and long
I
may it
still wouldn't
continue.
like his job though. To be the boss of a car company at the moment must be. Where do you apply your resources? What's the future going to look like? Inflation.
Well, and what's the
everything
thing? You know, if you're doing ICE car, internal combustion engine cars, consistently, is it £15,000 per unit you've got to pay as a fine as a manufacturer to keep producing them, unless you're producing enough electric cars?
It depends where you fall in the ZEV mandate. Which
It
is
doesn't get terribly complex, does it?
it's very confusing, but yes, it's any car over a certain percentage that you sell that isn't zero emissions, you have to pay some money. Which I guess for some businesses you can just build that into the cost of the car.
Yeah, but it's a tax.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another one. Yeah.
And of course, the other area that the company is riding high on is perhaps not from a success point of view, but Formula One grows and grows and grows, and the Formula One team is part of that, isn't it?
Well, it's going to be really interesting, isn't it, with Adrian Newey now joining the team, to see what sort of a difference that makes. Because he's, you know, we've all heard the name. He's acknowledged over the last, 20-something years as the guru in Formula One. And to have attracted him into the business, the way it was done, I think was very clever. And a little bit more success in that field will be good. And there's going to be a massive focus on Aston, if only, how's Adrian Newey doing? You know, there's going to be a big focus on all of that. And there's no doubting the marketing and PR that comes out of Formula One, the billions of people that watch it, millions of people watch it every weekend. It has to do some good for the brand in terms of awareness.
And they've got the course cars, haven't they?
Touches on that thing about
Safety cars.
brand awareness. I know it's a lot of filtering down, but it's going to sell, DB4, 5 or 6 to a guy in Bhutan. I don't know, place way out of our normal
Remember the
range.
inquiry we had from the Philippines at the end of last year? Who knew that there was a big Aston Martin collector in the Philippines? Not us until we had the inquiry.
Are they? Is that near the Cook Islands? It could be. There's a bit of a business opportunity there.
Are they close?
Yeah. He's not in today. He'll be in 2 weeks' time when he comes back.
But yeah, no, I think that's good news. And they've been doing very well in the sports car racing this year in the GT3 category. And then we've got next year the Valkyrie going to be at Le Mans in the hypercar class, which is going to be interesting. I know I've seen some stuff recently. It's been seen at Daytona, I think it was. I don't know whether anyone's leaked any times or whether they were going for any times, but it's going to be interesting. At Le Mans earlier on this year, watching the hypercars, they're very quick, and it's going to be interesting to see whether they can mix it or not on year one next year. Le Mans sold out again. Where are we? November. Next year's event is sold out. It's become like Glastonbury. So we shall have to wait and see. The motorsport arena is going to be interesting.
I think on the F1, one thing I'd add, and it's relevant to my background 20 years ago, it's been a massive commercial success. They've probably got the best sponsor roster on the grid. They've attracted a lot of sponsors. The appeal of having your brand attached to Aston Martin and Formula One, Aramco, I saw that they've just announced a big deal with Xerox. They're going to be on the car from the next Grand Prix. They've probably got the best sponsored car on the grid next season. The dealers will just want them to start winning on Sunday so they can sell on Monday. They'll be desperate for a bit more success on track. And I've heard from a few people say, well, they'll be concentrating on 2026 now. I'd be surprised. They won't be losing focus on 2025 before that. They're going to want success. But they can't just burn another season. So hopefully next year's an improvement on this year, because it's been a bit of a tough watch.
With Formula One, they've been at it for a while now, haven't they, in the modern context? So people tend to, we've always Aston Martin enthusiasts tend to think, well, it's sports car racing. But now, Formula One, I think we all root for them, don't we?
Yeah. I'm an Alonso fan, so he's my whichever team he was driving for, I'd probably be cheering him on. I like his style.
And also Adrian Newey is a car guy in American parlance. He's a fantastic, very good driver, and he's got a fantastic collection of historic cars, and he drives them with an inch of their lives. So it's good to have someone like that involved in the team as well.
And you told me, what's his daily driver?
Well, yeah, apparently for some time his daily driver home up to the Red Bull offices in, where is it, Milton Keynes. Did you know?
No.
V12 Vantage. So, quite interesting. Anyway, I just heard that secondhand. I thought it was quite interesting.
Okay.
I think the Formula One thing is going to be worth watching next year, and I can't believe. I know it's not supposed to happen, and Adrian's under contract to Red Bull till the end of the year, but I can't believe that from the day after he was announced as going to Aston, he hasn't been working away in his head at it. And there'll be probably a drastically revised car on the grid at the first race next year.
And a very unhappy person in a blue car. Where'd that green thing come from?
From Formula One to another favourite of Aston Martin enthusiasts, 007. And it's the anniversary of the DB5 in Goldfinger this year. And I think, have you done a feature on it recently?
We haven't, but our sister magazine Magneto has done a huge thing. It's beautifully produced. Everyone should go and buy it.
Jolly good. And that's done in connection with Matthew Field, who's
written the book. Matthew previously wrote what I would happily call the definitive book on the Italian job, and has really taken his time over this one, and he's written it in collaboration with someone else, and it is the definitive guide really it's called Octane Bond or Bond Octane. I've forgotten.
Spy Octane.
Spy Octane, which is
I
sounds
was
familiar.
hoping
Part
to
of that
arrange a
name.
copy to have here, but unfortunately it's at the...
And that's his
the
excellent
printers
part.
now.
I
Hasn't
approve
he
it
also
wholeheartedly.
done, the different Bond DB5s, because there's different cars in different films and so on.
The Magneto article features them all in one way or other. All the Bond DB5. So I mean, obviously, originally you had the cars that were filmed, and you had the propped cars, and you had the publicity cars. And I don't plan to go into which one is which and where they are now. But I think we all know where the real ones are.
Yeah,
I've
interesting.
seen a proof of the book, and it is fantastic. And if anybody's looking for a Christmas present, no financial interest to me, but it is a really, really good book, isn't it?
I haven't seen it.
No, well, I've seen some drafts of it. It is extremely good. I know Matthew.
Did you see the cover prize?
Not yet. It's not like another well-known publisher, but anyway, it is a very good book. Yeah. But everybody wants you've sold your business and you're going to treat yourself silver DB5. Do people still do that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I meet people who want that. I meet people who have no classic cars yet. They've always been vaguely interested, but peripheral. And they want one, and that's it. That is the one car that they've lusted after since they were however many years old they first saw a Bond film.
Well, it's a gateway car. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I got into Aston Martin in the first place. I saw the DB5, and then I saw the Vanquish in the same film, and went, yes, I would quite like that. This is the brand for me, right? So it's you can understand why, really. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and the Bond effect is definitely relevant on some of the other models that are featured in the films as well. The more modern DBS 2008 to 2012, the number of people we have had interested in buying one, that is referred to. I fell in love with these when I saw in Casino Royale for the first time. In fact, we sold a DBS this year, a lovely midnight blue example, to a 24-year-old who had been saving up all his life.
But if you think about it, when Casino Royale came out in 2016, 8 years ago, that makes him 16 at the time. So that's going to be the poster car for not quite this generation. He's a bit of an exception. He's worked and saved very hard to get to that position. But in 10 years' time, where more of his peer group are starting to fancy a car.
I wonder what his insurance quote is.
Oh, can you imagine?
You get this so much though, don't you, when you think about it? DBS, is that the sort of car that was in the Bond films?
Yeah.
Yes it is, yeah. Okay. Grey V8. Great. Wasn't that the Grey V8? Wasn't that the car that was in that other Bond? Yeah. The yellow DBS, the Persuaders? Yeah. People associate certain models with films that they saw. It's strong, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think
away from it.
Bond films get so many more opportunities to be seen. You will be inclined to watch a Bond film on Netflix or Amazon Prime one afternoon. Do you go back and watch, dare I say it, like the Bourne films over and over and over again? Is it a tradition in people's Christmas schedule to sit down and watch a Bond movie, a Bourne movie together?
You have your Boxing Day Bond, not a Boxing Day Bourne. Who is this Matt Damon fellow? No.
Yeah, so it's going to keep on rolling and rolling and rolling, if you ask me. And will silver DB5s remain eternally popular as a result? Yes, but I think the Bond effect will, if it's not already, have an increasingly important effect on some of the more recent models that have been featured in the
Well,
cars.
they did DBS Superleggera, didn't they? OHMSS.
They did, yeah.
Specification.
Really good looking car, actually. Yeah.
Which looks really nice.
Yeah.
And in fact, the silver birch, I think, we did some figures for the Aston Trust, was the most populous colour. It's the colour everybody remembers with James Bond, but it actually was the car they made the most of. Right. But would you, with originality, if someone has got a lovely Dubonnet car, and they wanted it silver birch, would you let them do that?
You know the expression, Steve, he who pays the piper plays the tune.
You can always paint it back again, can't you?
Yeah, it's quantifiable cost.
They do look so sexy inside.
They do look
towards,
good. And I don't know whether
towards
any-
wrapping it instead. Try it in the colour, and you can always just peel it off if you don't like it.
Have you been into London and seen? But it's finished now. Burlington Arcade. It was decked out with Bond, wasn't it? In several months.
No, I didn't.
No, it's
I missed it as
fantastic.
well. I meant to go.
I did a walkthrough, but I was with my family, so I wasn't allowed to linger much.
Oh.
No, it was very impressive. So, well, that's all good. I mean, just finally on that, what sort of money are we talking about for a nice right-hand drive DB5?
I would start at around £600,000 today. Much less than that, you may be buying a car that needs investment on day one, and that might be a bit underwhelming to have bought your new car and be excited about using it, but the first 3 months it's in someone's workshop being fettled, so it's right. I'd say £600,000 plus, and possibly disproportionately value at the moment, because there are still people willing to buy project cars, barn finds, cars that have been coming back from the Middle East at late threes, £400,000, and they are going to have a bill of possibly that again.
Yeah, there's no margin in it, is there?
No. So the cars that are restored and on the button ready to be enjoyed at today's prices, maybe it is a good time to buy.
And it wouldn't be original, but if it was a left-hand drive car, which is, I'm not sure what the split is, 15%, 20% of DB5s
it's-
left-hand drive, would that be appreciabally more?
Left-hand drive's always been more.
Well, it's a bigger
more
market.
Yeah.
You know, we touched on it earlier on, because you can offer a right-hand drive silver birch car to someone in the States, but they don't want that, and you can offer a conversion, they don't want that. They actually want an original left-hand drive, which drives the original left-hand drive price even higher.
I can't remember the split of the coupes or the saloon, shall we say, but I do recall the DB5 convertible number, because we had one earlier on in the year, and I remember writing the description. That was 123 total, 81 UK right-hand drive. And that's probably quite a global market car in the day, because they were very expensive in 1965. So maybe the saloon ratio actually is higher towards right-hand drive than left-hand drive. So of the 900, 700.
I've never drilled down
Right-hand
to it.
drive?
It's it's just that we regularly get inquiries for a left-hand drive DB5. When you start talking about it, then it's got to be silver, and you almost say, "Well, I'll talk to you in 10 years," because they just don't come up.
Yeah.
But it's all going back to your thing about the Bond. It's a big power to the Bond thing, isn't it? I mean, is it the best colour really? If you look, I mean, we've seen some very nice blue ones and Dubonnet ones and green ones, but it's not silver. It's the colour, purely Bond.
Well, and you see all these the Bond car at events, and we usually talk about events, but I think there's nothing been particularly new this year. I mean, James, you go to lots of things. Anything interesting new that's happened this year in the events? You go to a nice meeting in London, don't you?
Oh, well, that's a very casual. I go to a thing called the Southside Hustle, which I went to solely because, and I know Al's been as well,
I
actually.
love it. It's one of my favourite things ever.
A couple of local enthusiasts, one sadly departed, Charles Evans and Jamie Wheatley. It started in COVID, where a few of them were just on a WhatsApp group, and they said, I know we're not allowed to meet up, but I will be on south side of Wimbledon Common on Sunday with my old car. And it just started from that, and a few of them got involved. And I took notice when Amura started turning up. And it's on my doorstep, it's a good run. I can be there and chat to everyone and be home again before anyone's noticed I've gone. And it's a great thing, and I love those. I went to another one down at the Black Swan in Ockham last week. I'm planning on another one. There's one at Walton Bridge this weekend. And those just sort of turn up, park up, and meet other people things. They're really my kind of events. But there have been some fantastic events. We've got the International Historic Motoring Awards coming up on Friday night, and one of the categories in that is the breakthrough event of the year, which is sort of for, I suppose, events making their debut. It could be slightly more loose as a description. But if you look at the stuff that's made its debut this year, the Oberoi Concours in India, which was massive and a huge triumph really for the first time out, to the Concours of Elegance in Germany as well at Tegernsee. We've got 5 first-time events this year, which are all huge, all massively impressive, and have sort of debuted as if they've been around for years. And I think that whoever is behind these events, the skill levels now have absolutely peaked in what they know, how they know to draw people in and have an event that entertains everyone, whatever their wealth, whatever their level of enthusiasm now. You know, if you go to Hampton Court, is one I know that you guys take a stand at. Yeah. You go to that and you'll meet all sorts there. You'll meet people who aren't even enthusiasts, who like the gardens and like looking at the cars. And I just think that the balance of these things is so much more democratized than perhaps it was 30 years ago, where there was a slightly more clubby atmosphere and you had to be not necessarily one of the in crowd, but you know, there wasn't a lot of, it wasn't as nurturing as they are now. I think we're much more adept at bringing people into our hobby and into the industry as well for the future. And events-wise, it's probably been one of the best years ever, especially in terms of new events.
Do you think there's too many events?
For me, too many for me to get to. That's
You've got to be in the office sometimes.
Well, Steve, I think my wife thinks there's too many events. Definitely in the summer when I'm never at home.
To one of ours yet.
Which ones?
Yeah.
No, I haven't been that long. There we go. That's a Sunday morning catered for, or a weekend.
Would pollinate.
Too many. No. As I work in the industry, between myself and the team, we need to be at a lot of events. There are a lot of events. What's it? Joni Mitchell. You know, I don't want to regret it when they're gone. I'll go to anything, absolutely anything. And let's just celebrate them while they're here.
Possibly the only thing you could say is that some cars are a bit overexposed, and they just tick but you see them at that event, then you see them at that event, then you see them. But we're in a fortunate position as we have been to a lot of the events.
Exactly. I mean,
so let's put it into perspective.
There is a tendency now for certain cars to do the season, and I can understand that. I mean, but then 15 years ago, if an English concours had one car come from America just for that concours, that was headline news. That was a big deal. Now you're getting these cars coming over from all over the world, and they do the summer, and they do several tours and several events. If I was the person footing the bill for shipping it and keeping it in the UK and stuff, I'd want to do everything with it. I'm not going to hold that against them. I may see it 4 or 5 times. I think most people only see it once.
I don't think there's too many events, but because people don't have to attend them, I think there's
not enough weekends.
There's the odd event that has maybe been a victim of its own success, where it's become too busy. I can't say I get as excited about going to Goodwood as I did 15, 20 years ago, because it's going to be busy, it's going to be a lot of traffic to get in there. And I don't want to major on that because that's unfair, because it's still an absolutely unbelievable event. But my point is, there are some events which are so good and are therefore so popular. I, as a industry professional that have been to these events many times before, I might say, I'm not going to bother with that one.
I think the Concours of Elegance is particularly good, isn't it? Because it's very easy for you two to get to. And
we've always enjoyed it.
That is a very,
the
very good
location's
event.
fabulous.
And the cars are world class, aren't they?
Yeah, and the organisation's good. So.
Salon Privé as well, I think. Different type of event. I think some people compare them. I don't get that at all. I think if you're comparing them, you've misunderstood what both of them are about. I think that as well, if you take it more as a sort of the Quail Lodge, Quail Motorsport gathering model, I think that really works as well. It's slightly different, and obviously it's at Blenheim Palace, which is spectacular. We've got a lot of really good events.
Yeah, we are.
As you said, I mean, without Goodwood, it's harder to work at than it used to be, just because of the sheer weight of people.
Yeah.
If you go down with no responsibilities,
Yeah.
and you're just there to enjoy the racing.
I
I'm
d-
sure it's
I don't think
amazing as
I
ever.
don't think anyone could, with any justification, say don't go.
No.
Everyone should go. It's a brilliant
It is
event,
fantastic.
But then
but
the-
it is difficult if you're working.
But the members meeting, for me, fulfills the atmosphere of the early revivals and that sort of sense of, just being at something small and special.
Absolutely.
And also, I mean, not something you wouldn't drive to, was the Paris Retronaville is good, isn't it?
Yeah.
A nice thing after Christmas on the train. That's always a nice
It was
couple of days in
our
Paris.
first year since 2019. This year we had the break. Well, obviously we had the break with COVID, and it was great to be back. Actually, it was a nice way to start the year.
We used to convoy out, and it was great until you hit the periphery. And it was a great camaraderie thing. All the Brits would drive out there. A lot of them used to drive down to Essen. You'd hit the periphery, and then you'd park. And parking in Paris is not ideal with anything, is it? And so obviously Eurostar came along and saved all our lives, and it's hard to turn your back. I slightly miss the journey out, but
You're more than welcome to do it.
no, I couldn't. You park any car in Paris, you come back to it, it's a foot shorter each end.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's great meeting new people and seeing new things. Long may they continue. So I think we've touched on this in the past. We're talking about a book just earlier on. What's the market for books, magazines, is whatever it is, but people want to be looking at things online, like your YouTube experiences. I mean, how do you think that's working out? I mean, when you do a car launch, which I haven't done for a while, in the later years it was, you've got to do a video and all this sort of thing. But now a lot of it's done on phones, but there are car channels online and there's podcasts. I mean, what are some of the ones you'd recommend, Alex?
If you're an automotive enthusiast, you have access to just about anything you could possibly want. If you like just Aston Martins, there will be a channel there for you. If you want to watch someone recover, a Mark 1 Escort out of a hedge and painstakingly rebuild it over the course of months and years, that's there for you too. If you want high-end, high-performance big skids, that's there. If you want straight up, this is what car A does, and a kind of a list of features, that's there for you. When I personally, I watch everything and nothing at the same time. It's whatever's put in front of me. I go, oh yes, that's interesting, and I just inhale whatever my various algorithms throw at me. And it's same when it comes to I think publishing. I mean, you'll know better than I do. Publishing's in an interesting place right now because there's the model of very lovely subscription mag that's basically a coffee table book, and then we've got kind of the niche ends of the market. Some of them are struggling quite a lot, but then you've got the more sort of consumer mags like Top Gear seem to be doing okay. So there is still something there for you, but I think a lot of it has moved online, right?
More than I would like as well. I don't think you can ignore online. I think that those magazines will have to be clever about how they position themselves in the market, and that maybe, in 10 years' time, your print magazine is the smallest part of your business, and you've got a bigger brand that deals with videos and everything else. And because you have to, you have to serve what the market wants, otherwise you cease to exist. We're very lucky that the subject matter we deal with is a, naturally nostalgic thing. And I bet amongst classic car owners, there's a hell of a lot of people who've still got vinyl record collections. And it's about tactility and an atmosphere and a sense of joy that these things give you. And classic cars go along with that, and vinyl records, as I've just said. But if you look at the magazine market outside of the classic cars niche, it's on its knees. People are talking about it sort of not lasting another 5 years. We've got a stay of execution because of what we deal with and the psychology of the people who are interested in that subject matter, which is great. But they also like to luxuriate in something a little more long-lasting. And you know, if you look at a picture across a double-page spread, you don't really get that on a telephone. Or I prefer to read. I can't get on with a Kindle. I like to turn pages. So you know, there will always be a market as long as there are enthusiasts. But we will have to adapt and survive as time passes on. At the moment, everything's fine. In 15 years' time, what the magazines will look like or how they fit into a portfolio of media, I don't know. But as long as the enthusiasts are there, these products will be there, as will the online stuff.
I mean, to continue that point, you say the industry needs to kind of manage how its content is put across. If you look right now, there's a huge influencer kind of space. Again, anything from escorts in hedges to classic Aston Martins to, you know, just walking around London and taking pictures of cars. And some of them are just, you know, on a phone, doing their thing, staring down it. And it's, a lot of people find it quite easy to look down their noses at it and say, well, what value does that bring? Well, the value it brings is that it puts new eyes on cars and it brings new personalities into a space that has otherwise been kind of filled with the same voices for so very long. You know, it has it's allowed more people to not only have an opinion. Sometimes, you know, we were saying earlier, sometimes they might not know entirely what they're on about, but some people, and a lot of them genuinely do, and they're enthusiastic about it and they want to share it. And I think I don't understand a lot of some of that space. You know, TikTok is a mystery to me, but there are people out there who are creating films, or they're creating small little fact files on a DB4 GT or a Vanquish or Zagato and its partnership with Aston Martin, and they can distill that down into 90 seconds, which is an incredible skill. Like, script writing in general is hard, and you don't know how hard it is until you actually have to do it. And then imagine trying to get all the key points of a Vanquish S into 90 seconds and getting the bob on and being engaging and producing this whole thing as one person, which is amazing.
It's an interesting point now, because the thing with a magazine is that actually you can digest it at your own rate.
Yeah.
And you can enjoy it the way you want to enjoy it, as opposed to a video, which is, it's at you.
It's in your face. I mean, having...
And there's a lot more there. It's who's presenting it.
Yeah.
Can you listen to this fellow? You know, it's quite a different experience.
Yeah,
And
I mean, so...
I think there's probably also something, you know, this thing about when you read something, it must be true, because there it is. It's like you read something in the paper, so it must be right. Or, you know, there's something about reading and facts that I think just feels more comfortable.
But there is, I mean,
than opinion on a YouTube, and I'm
but
not
there's
into
a generation of people who have grown up, I guess, with iPads. You know, I've seen people saying, "Oh, my kid tried to swipe the telly today, tried to swipe a magazine," and so the way their information has been presented to them has been through a YouTube video or through social media or word of mouth or whatever. So I think the way, you know, the information delivery system. There will be, you know, I will still lovingly sit down and spend an afternoon reading a magazine, absorbing, you know, what's clearly been incredibly well researched. And because it's there on the piece of paper, it has this extra kind of value, perceived or otherwise, that, you know, this is a month's worth of a whole huge team of people's work. And it's then you flick through a TikTok and you think, well, that's taken someone a day to make or whatever, and then it kind of in the middle ground you find these amazing long form videos on the internet, you know, come out of the UK, come out of the US, come out of wherever. You know, I spent 5 years of my life trying to do that, sort of emulating what we could see on the quality you would get on television, like in the heyday of Top Gear, and those things take so long to make, or if they don't take a long time, you have to work really hard to spend as little money as possible to make it look as good as possible. If you want to get the full cinematic thing, you have to...
But there are some enormously talented people who I see on online content, whether it's longer form videos or the shorter form videos, because, you know, it's as difficult to write for the Sun as it is to write for the Times. Harder, a lot of people would say, because it's a different science. You know, you have to condense it and get your point across in a very specific way. But when you look online, I am in awe some of the talent of these people, and without that space, very few of these people would have got jobs in the motoring media. You know, it's notoriously oversubscribed. There was a point where if you wanted to work for one of the new car magazines, where you basically had to come and do work experience for about 3 or 4 years, then an internship, and then if you were lucky, you might get a junior position. I'm not criticising the magazines, but what I'm saying, and you had people queuing round the block to do that.
I mean, I was an intern in 2007 and 2008.
Yep.
You know, 2008 is when all the money fell off, and it's when I left university, and there was no way I was going to get a job, so I had to be an intern. Or, you know, the way I kind of did it was I started a podcast, and then people started listening to it, and then I ended up with this what was Carfection for Carfection X Car. They went, oh, you do new media stuff, have a crack at this.
But that's great, because 20 years ago,
Didn't exist.
you just wouldn't have been able to do that. You'd have said, I've had my...
Well, actually, it nearly is 20 years ago.
But I was going to say, can we, anybody here recommend one? And it sounds to me as if it's a typical internet thing. Everybody's sort of having a look in a bit of that and babbling onto something else, and you don't. It's not like you're waiting for the latest edition.
Legacy media. Some of it. Oh, it's weird to call it legacy media.
Am I a legacy media?
You are.
Is this what
You are a legacy media. So am I.
Ancient media.
But you get, you know, mags like Top Gear are producing incredible video, as is Car Magazine, and they've seen the space and they've seen what you can do with it, and they've gone, right, well, we can do that, but we'll do it our way. And you keep the charm of the copy, and you keep the charm of what made the magazine so great, but you've put that out to a different audience. And I think they've been very clever, very smart with it. When it comes to influencers, I mean, I tend to look at the ones who have previously been legacy media, because they kind of speak my language. But I know more than a few who have started off by going, well, I want to do that for a job, but I clearly can't do that for a job because there are finite jobs. And you know, they're going great guns. They've got great things.
Anyone in particular that you'd mention?
Ooh, that would require a lot of thought and a lot of.
I thought you were going to say people like Henry Catchpole, Jethro
to avoid
Bovington.
upsetting anybody, I will.
Oh, okay,
no
right,
names.
okay. But I find them some of the best kind of YouTube presenters because I think they've earned their spurs a bit, having been in the industry a long time and written so well. I always enjoy their content, and I always enjoy Harry's Garage as well.
Well, yeah, everyone does.
I love Harry's Garage, and obviously he is the exception to all the rules. I mean, when you look at his video quality is lovely, but we are not talking about the sort of 40 or 50,000 pound production with 4 days in post-production compared with some of the videos that people are doing. And his presenting style is just purely personable. There's you know, there is, I have to put this politely, there isn't any sort of BBC-isation at Harry. And yet the success and popularity of it is unquestionable.
Do you think it travels? Do you think people are? Is that a British cult thing, Harry's Garage, or do people around the world enjoy it in the same way?
I suspect that people around the world wouldn't understand him in the same way that we do.
Well, it's still, the Harry's Garage video still makes news. In the States, I've seen Jalopnik feature his stuff a few times. I've seen, I think the Drivers featured it more than once, largely because of the things he says tend to make sense.
Not the Cotswold countryside in the background.
Yes, that does help.
James saying exception to all the rules segues us effortless into our next topic. Is we've got new president next year in the US. Do you think? I mean, he's a bit of a car guy, isn't he? You've been doing some research on this. You've been on the internet.
I've seen a picture of him getting into a Lamborghini Countach or Diablo.
His
one
Diablo
of the two.
sold
Was it
at
Diablo?
auction recently. I think it was gold. perhaps unsurprisingly, the man obsessed with gold. It was, gold.
I think it's fair to say he's a car guy.
He's probably got a Tesla right now, though.
Joe Biden had a Corvette, didn't he?
Biden is a car guy.
Yeah.
He did.
Huge car guy.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, it's we'll see. I think it's
Tariffs could be interesting.
There's going to be oil. There's going to be cars. There's going to be stuff made over there with engines in it. So we'll see what happens.
No, another headache for the CEOs of these car companies to be thinking about right now, the potential of tariffs. But in our world, I can't see Donald Trump being bad news for classic cars. I think.
Well, our friend Steve Serio thought it was great news.
Yeah.
American dealer, sorry.
Yeah. Well, also, I think in the past that I think he's been, the economy has probably done reasonably well, and I think the big guys like making money and possibly buying cars, so who knows?
I'm no
We'll
expert,
see.
but even from the early days, it looks like it's going to be a very different presidency to his last one.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see. Now, we've got a bit of a game for you. Now, you can now, it's a bit like
There's something to Jenga.
it's a bit like a sound. You may now open your
Oh,
envelope.
I wondered what this. I thought you were expecting us to take notes,
and
and
open-
I felt very silly.
Now, the idea, it's Neil's idea, I saying quickly if it doesn't work out. Rather than,
Don't blame me.
we traditionally pick our favourite cars, and I think the three of us always say the same cars. So we'll ask you two gentlemen later on to pick a couple of cars as something that you'd like from Astons. But Neil came up with a good idea that our friends at Aston Martin like reusing names. And we've got, for example, we've got 3 Vanquishes there. I don't think, has anybody had a ruling on whether it's Van Cly or are they all called Vanquishes?
Why? Oh, no, I don't think we'll be
No,
like that.
okay, anyway. So out of the 3, the task is to pick which one you'd prefer. So
And you've got to justify it.
you've got to justify it. So your idea, Neil, you kick us off.
I think I would probably plump for the Mark I, the first generation Vanquish. It was what I was selling most of when I first joined the business in 2008, and when I was at Aston Martin 2005 to 2008, it was always at the factory. So I think I've got the strongest emotional connection to the first generation Vanquish. I also think it's possibly one of their best designs of all time. I think it still looks brilliant 20 years on. So I'm going to go first generation Vanquish.
Alex, let's go around.
I'll join you on that, but can I have it with a manual conversion, please?
You certainly can.
Thank you
You
very
can't actually. We sold that one a couple of
Oh,
years ago.
blast!
We'll find another one.
Yeah, it's as I said earlier with the Bond connection. It was one of the first sort of times I was aware of Bond was when the Vanquish appeared, and I thought, because I was always, when I was a kid, there was a James Bond film on every now and then. It was all very exciting, but the Brosnan era, Brosnan was sort of my Bond.
Yeah, sure.
And
I'm sorry.
I liked him. He was good. But the Vanquish, it was the first time I was like, that is a bit of me. It's brutish, it's brawny, it makes the right noise, it looks fantastic. But yeah, I would quite like it with the stick in it, because that gearbox is a bit much for me.
Sure.
Heart and head. Heart, obviously, I always prefer the oldest, the purest, the first. I'm going to go for the latest, because if I had one of these, it would be my everyday car, and I would drive it every day when I wasn't in my old cars. So I want the latest, most evolved.
Okay, that's good. That's reason. Nick?
Good, interesting. Bit of a cop out this, because the car I like most visually is the first one. It's the one that had the greatest impact, and it was a whole new thing. And I think even 20 years after it came out, it still just looks fantastic. The practicality of the Gen 2 car, though, is something to be considered. Carbon body, all those people in a car park that outside Sainsbury's can't actually biff your door, and so on and so forth. But difficult one. You know, the second gen is a great car. We know it. It's a great car. But the first one is the one that made the biggest impact.
Okay.
For what it's worth, I think the new one, I do think they're going to be very successful with it.
Steve, you get an answer as well?
Well, I am certainly. I like the first generation one, and I like it as just having it for a weekend with someone else paying for the gearbox. I drove the manual conversion when they first did it, and I wasn't terribly impressed with it. I like the original flappy paddle, and never got into trouble with it. I think they're fantastic
Don't
cars.
up it till you
Well,
try it.
the trouble was
tried it,
majoritively with the early cars. The later cars were very much better.
Right, now if you turn over your papers, we've got some DBSs there, which is another Aston Martin favourite. Let's go around this way. shall we this time? Nick, over to you on that. Which of these would you have?
Is the question which would I have?
Well, yeah, go on. Yeah, which is your favourite?
Well, that's different. That's different. I'm on record, and I'm a big believer in the original DBS. Not that it's the greatest driving car here, so that's what would I have versus what would I drive or whatever. But I think they're immensely undervalued, and I think that will change actually over the next few years as we enter the next
Do you think people will make
phase of the
sixes
up
or
and
eights?
down of the market. Well, I think a well sorted 8, to be
Yeah.
honest, and I think you've got to relate it to its peer group when it was
Yeah.
new. The peer group of that car when it was new
Yeah.
was Miuras and Daytonas and stuff like that. And this is a very powerful car, and it's immensely undervalued. When you look at those other things, they're exactly the same. They're all steel chassis, alley body, big engine.
Yep.
They don't drive particularly well by modern day standards, but they're a hell of a car when they're sorted out, and there are some out there. So I'm going to go with that one, actually.
James?
I'm not going to surprise anyone by completely agreeing with Nick. I think that William Towns's facelift on that is one of the most deft facelifts ever done on any British car. When it's come after such a long line of, from DB4 GT Series 5 onwards, and to mess with that and then to come up with something so resonant and so embodying everything that Aston was, and yet beautiful clean lines at the front, that's the car for me. In fact, that might be the Aston for me.
6 or 8?
I always liked the 8, and I listened to everyone else who says, no, you need the 6 because of the 6 and the legacy of the 6. To hell with them, I want the 8.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Alex?
Don't have the car everyone else wants. That'd be silly. And on that theme, I'm going to have the newest one, the Superleggera. I love the shape. I love the shape of all of them. The Bond DBS, the Daniel Craig Bond one. Again, it's one of those cars that I saw that because that's against my era of Astons. This is a bit of me, but I remember having a go in that DBS, and 720 horsepower. It's quite a lot of horsepower, and it's a bit of a hold on for dear life and enjoy yourself car.
Don't think Lazenby, think Diana Rigg.
But I do often. But no, the latest or the most recent DBS is for me it's got the big angry mouth. I love the rear 3/4 treatment is bang on, and the power is pleasingly silly.
Neil, I think I know what you're going to go for, but you surprised me.
I think I might surprise you, actually. I'm going to go for a DBS V8.
Yeah.
I think it's a super cool look. I don't think you would offend anybody in that car. No one. You turned up to a Southside Hustle. Would that
be the
get
start.
kudos?
You'd be the
That would
star
be
of
a
the
popular
show.
car. That would be a
Star of the
popular
show
car.
if you did
Yeah, a well-sorted manual, please. One of those. We sold a very cool white one a few years ago.
I think I drove it, didn't I? It was very nice.
That's right, you did. Yeah, I love that one.
That was nice.
So I'm going to go DBS V8.
Well, so am I. I really enjoyed driving that one. And they come in some very nice
Common
What's going on
things,
here?
they're everywhere.
Yeah, well, we're all fighting over it. You can make them extremely fast. You can make them easily as fast as an X-Pac Vantage with some tuning. I mean, they really are impressive cars. Okay, let's finish off on this round. We've got 3 classic DBs. We've got DB4, 5 and 6. Something slightly different. Out of the 3, what are you going to go for, Neil?
I'm on record previously saying that I do like a Series 2 DB4. I'm not changing my tune, but if you haven't before and you get the opportunity to, a really well sorted DB6 Mark II is a joy to drive. I think that's the one of the range that I feel most comfortable in today's traffic conditions. If I was driving up to the Yorkshire moors for the weekend, a DB6 Mark II sits comfortably at 75 miles an hour on the A1 for a couple of hours at a time until you've got to stop for some fuel. I really rate a DB6 Mark II. So Oh, I've got to choose now, haven't I? Series 2 DB4.
I didn't think
Alex?
you were going that way at all. That's-
I know. It's a tough one.
I am torn, partly because I am a walking cliche, and partly because I don't like to be a walking cliche. DB4 works for me because Charlie Croker. It's a different film connection, but I was out shooting tigers, and I just like the idea.
Convertible,
of people coming up
but
and going,
it's a DB4.
It's still. Someone comes, oh, what's that? Is that a DB5? No, it's an Aston Martin DB4. Oh, what's that then? And then you get to be a real nerd about it. Sometimes that makes you look like a bit of a knob, but with an Aston, it's fine. Or DB5, but only one of the mega special Goldfinger continuation editions, because I've driven one of those and they let me press the smokescreen button, and it's really fun. They let me drive it on the road, and I took it out, and there was a police car at a mini roundabout, and you have no idea. I was hovering over the smokescreen button. It was only when I got to where we were going, they said, we did turn those off for the road because you might get in trouble. I think as fun as dropping thumbtacks on the floor would be in front of miscreants, probably go for DB4 because it's got a wonderful purity of shape. It's not the one that everyone would go for, though I have a sneaking suspicion around this table not everyone's going to go for the DB5, but still, yeah, DB4 for me, please and thank you.
DB6. There are reasons.
There are reasons, they are many.
Number one, this is the only one of your questions where value is you can't ignore values. And I can't justify, even the way sixes have gone in the last 10 years, I cannot justify the value difference between the 6, the 5 and the 4. I'm in a 6 all the time. I love the camtail. I don't know what the problem with the camtail is. I've never had a problem with it. Plus also, one of my very first jobs when I joined Classic and Sports Car in the 90s was I picked up an unseen, untested car from Chelsea Cars, and it was a DB6, and I picked up a photographer in somewhere off the A3, and we drove straight down to Le Mans, blagged our way onto the circuit like you used to be able to do, drove around Le Mans a bit, took some pictures and drove home again, and it was just a wonderful drive. And I drove one again recently on the Hope Classic Rally, and it just brought back all those memories of what a wonderful driving car it is. And as Neil said, I think you wouldn't have any worries about using that in the modern world.
Okay, Nick?
Well, that's all been said, really, hasn't it? Yeah, the DB6 Mark II is a great car.
That is a Mark II, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily understood. I'm also on record about DB4s because I love the purity of it all, and they're lighter and more of a sports car. The DB4 and DB6 is an entirely different car, really, in when you start driving them. The DB5 in lots of ways falls between two stools because it hasn't got the interior capacity, the room of a DB6 and the headroom and so on. And it's not light like a DB4, so it hasn't got the same responsive nature. But there is something about arriving and parking a silver DB5 and its international recognition and currency, or call it what you like. So I don't know, I'm very on the fence, but can I ask you a question? What was it again? Which would I take?
Yeah, I think
Where?
so. Well, which one? Okay, forced to choose at gunpoint. Which would you prefer out of these three? For a long journey, the DB6 wins all day long, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But something to savour and look at.
I'm going to change my tune. I think I fancy a Mark II. I'm getting older and the seat's more comfortable and it has power steering as standard.
Well, I'm going to say, I do like DB4s, but I'm going to say a DB5, Goodwood Green with tan, with a David Browncock gearbox.
Well,
And then you're going to bring it
Because
here and
of
off
those.
to have it silver birch.
yeah,
Because
that'll be the next one.
it's a nicer gearbox, although it's not quite as durable. It's a nicer change.
Yeah.
So, or possibly a DB6 Mark II Volante, but no, DB5.
Well, if anyone watching can tell us how many of those they made, they'll win a prize.
What, the
weren't many.
DB6 short chassis, Vantage
No,
Volante?
DB5 with a 4-speed gearbox in Goodwood Green.
Oh, well, no idea now you've had
They
it the
make quite a
colour.
lot of Goodwood Green cars, as we know from from some of the figures we did
But
last
how
year
many
for the trust.
DB5s were there with a 4-speed gearbox?
See,
James?
chaps, the day
Have we-
this
have we
goes
lost
out,
you? Have we lost you?
The day this goes out, the moment this goes out, I want you all just to put your ears out the window, and you'll be able to hear very gently someone going, "I think you're fine."
So
Someone's going to know.
we've had a bit of fun with that. Looking at our two guests, pick a couple of Astons that'd be an ideal combination. So perhaps it could be an old one, could be a new one, one of each, or you're not quite sure about a new one of two versions. It could be one of each. What do you think, Alex?
You're doing two-car garage.
Two-car garage,
Two
Astons.
Aston
It's got to
garage.
be Aston.
That's tough. I'm racking my little brain now. I would probably have the original V12 Vantage, the 6-speed stick. I like that a lot. I remember having a go in one and spending a very, very lovely week in one of those. And it's the right size. It makes the right noise. It's a good London car because it fits everywhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does things to me that I rather enjoy. We're gonna have to come back to me for a second one. That's tough. That's really tough. I'm staring at that Zagato over there. Oh, actually, not that one. Fixed head DB7 Zagato. I've always liked those.
Yeah, underrated.
They've-
Great cars to drive.
There used to be one knocking around near the Dennis offices near Tottenham Court Road. There used to be a street parked one, and I remember seeing it sort of every now and then going, yes, that works for me. That works a lot for me. I'll have those two, please, and thank you.
Okay, James?
My modern daily family car would be a DB9. And realistically, you know, that is a realistic price proposition for a lot of people, whether you can run it daily and afford to maintain it as well. If that's your price point is questionable, but I think that's a massively overlooked car that can do a great job for me personally. My other one would be probably perm one of about 5, but obviously an Ulster. But I'd settle for a 2-litre speed. I might even settle for an international. I was introduced to pre-war Astons as driving machines relatively recently, and they are just phenomenal. Absolutely wonderful machines, and I love them. And I think people forget that vintage is out there, and it's an important part of the history. And the cars are genuinely extremely good for their era, and they don't get enough credit, I don't think.
I think people can't see beyond the small engines, but the whole package is very, very nice. Very sweet little cars to drive, aren't they?
Lovely to drive. Yeah.
That's right. Now, changing the subject slightly with you two gentlemen, buying opportunities, what should people be looking for? And I'm going to ask you, Neil, about the modern era cars, and Nick on heritage era cars.
Well, I would say
Pick a couple.
value. There's everywhere at the moment. There has been a bit of softening in prices, as we said earlier on. The relativity towards the price of brand new cars nowadays, when the price of a brand new Volkswagen Golf, as tested in Autocar, is £49,000, it doesn't half make that V12 Vantage that you like look
Well, hang on, if
tempting.
I could just do a little bit more finance and I could have one of those.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot better, and it would be a lot less nickable than a Golf R.
So there's the affordability is there across the board. Where would I look for value? I would say 2014 to 2017 DB9s, the last of the DB9s, when they got facelifted, carbon ceramic brakes, bit extra brake horsepower, a really good one of those for 50-ish thousand pounds.
All automatic?
They're
all automatic.
I feel validated.
A really good one of those, 50-ish thousand pounds. That can't get much cheaper. Going to be great to drive. So there's one.
Nick?
In the old space,
The old, the heritage.
well, we've hit on it once already, DBS V8. You know, a sort of light bulb went off in my brain about that some months
What sort
ago.
of money are we talking about, please?
I think you can get a perfectly respectable car for about 175,000, which doesn't make sense when you think of the values of its peer group.
Performance is colossal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, DBS V8, and you know, I'm a V8 person, really, I suppose. I think V8 Volantes are great value for money at the moment. I think their prices are held back to some degree because there's a lot of cars in Europe that have come back from the States that are federal spec cars and had various bits of conversion done to them. They're not particularly desirable or even good to drive because of their federal standards origins, and the prices are low, and it's, I think, holding back. Again, it's about the visibility on pricing, you know, through the magazines and whatever. I think it holds back good quality right-hand drive cars, but that's a nice car to own. They look good, hood up, hood down. They've got great range, nice, comfortable.
You wouldn't need
Good enough
advantage on
performance.
that, would you? We've also got we've got nice performance.
Well, there's
but-
always done the wants a Vantage version of anything. That's the whole point of Vantage. But given that it's a convertible and it's not all about pure performance, it's about tooling around the place with the roof down and enjoying the countryside. Yeah, you don't need a Vantage to do that. But if you've got one, you've got top trumps.
Very good. Well, it's been another fantastic afternoon spent talking Aston Martins.
Yeah,
I think we've learnt quite a lot, that values are sort of holding up pretty well. Got some interesting buying ideas. We've got some great input from you two guys. So thank you very, very much for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Steve. Thank you, Steve.
And
Alex, James.
we look forward to seeing you all next year. And do comment on the video. Do let us know what you think, and we've got any input on it. It will be religiously read and acted upon. So thank you very much.